You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz. For great radio, get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Good afternoon, everybody. You're listening to the Holonet Podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. From Phoenix, Arizona, I'm your host, Matt Holloway. Did want to let you know today we're going to be diving in headlong to the budget considerations that went through the House last week, because we have to seriously ask the question, does the Republican Party even know how to conservative anymore? Based on that vote, I'd say no. We're going to dig into that. We're also going to discuss a little bit the contentious race for Congressional District 8 here in Phoenix. That is to replace the outbound Trent Franks. All that and more here on the Holonet Podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. Stick around.
You're listening to the HoloNet Podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. The new conservative resistance begins right here, right now.
I will build a great, great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. Mark my words.
The American people are frustrated because their elected officials don't listen. Well, we're home on the campaign trail. We say we listen. And yet something about this Senate floor, something about Washington, D.C., I don't know if it's the water, something in the air, the cherry blossoms, but people get here and they stop listening to the American people.
What we witnessed here today in the Security Council is an insult. It won't be forgotten. It's one more example of the United Nations doing more harm than good in addressing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
My duty, and the sacred duty of every elected official in this chamber, is to defend Americans, to protect their safety, their families, their communities, and their right to the American dream. Because Americans are dreamers too.
I want the people of America to be able to work less for the government and more for themselves. I want them to have the rewards of their own industry. This is the chief meaning of freedom. Until we can reestablish a condition under which the earnings of the people can be kept by the people, we are bound to suffer a very severe and distinct curtailment of our liberty.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Senators, members of Congress, Mr. Speaker, and Mr. President. You had one damn job. Seriously.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network.
The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, Lanterns Media Network is proud to bring to you the HoloNet Podcast, live from Phoenix, Arizona. Beautiful, again, unseasonably warm Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, at least the day started out a little cold. I mean, got out there, played with the kids. It was like in the 70s, and then by like lunchtime, we're edging up toward almost 90. I mean, it's like 5 minutes of spring or fall, and then summer instantly. And winter, I think, lasts about a month and a half, maybe, tops. As opposed to, the 3 months that the rest of the freedom-loving world seems to get. But I live in Arizona. No winter. Anyway, coming to you this morning, a little bit distressed, admittedly. A little bit distressed with what we've seen from Washington, D.C. of late. I mean, we really do have to sit back and examine now. Since the election of President Trump, since the Tea Party wave, since we seemingly won the war. I mean, we won the fight as conservatives. We fought well, damn it, and we won, and we got our man in office. We got majorities in both the House of Representatives and the Senate, so we should expect the most conservative, the most pro-American, the most beneficial conservative policies in a generation out of this year. I mean, granted, you had some hiccups last year because President Trump was getting his administration set up. There's nominations you got to go through, all that fun garbage. But at the end of it all, I mean, there's the matter of the tax break, which I felt was a fantastic piece of legislature. I think giving people a $1.5 trillion tax break is excellent. But as I've stated in other shows prior to this, where is the other hand? Where is the subsequent massive spending cut that needs to occur in order to make this fiscally responsible? And I'm trying to find it. We go to stories like Business Insider. A colossal waste of time. Senators blast Rand Paul for pushing government into brief shutdown. Because the government very briefly shut down at about 3 o'clock in the morning. And, they're pinning the second government shutdown of 2018 on him. And it wasn't incredibly complicated at all. What Rand Paul was objecting to was the massive increase in spending, nearly $300 billion over the current limits over 2 years, that came with the budget deal and its impact on the national debt. Essentially, Rand Paul was being the fiscal conservative that Rand Paul always is. But I think this is a case of the entire party now, or at least the party leadership, has moved to the center. Now, was that to be kind of expected with President Trump in office? Probably. Because President Trump is a deal maker, so that means you're fighting for the middle ground. And I think that's what he's doing right now. He's middling in order to get what he wants, in order to get the wall, in order to get immigration reform. I mean, President Trump's policies are good. They are sound. They are conservative. But a lot of the work that Congress has been doing has been anything but. We've massively increased the debt. We've done very little, if anything, to shrink the size of government. You took the individual mandate off of Obamacare, but you left a lot of the cancer in there. I mean, a lot of the death that's going to bring down our fiscal house is still baked in to Obamacare. It's going to take decades to weed it all out. And that work needs to be done. Now, the budget package, the budget deal, despite Senator Rand Paul's delay, eventually passed the Senate by an overwhelming vote before it passed to the House, where it was passed around 5:30 a.m. Eastern Time. So all this took place on Friday, February 9th. So this past Friday. All right? Now, what I want to see, and which I'm having a little bit of trouble finding, is the exact roll call vote that caused us to move forward. And I'm having a hell of a time finding it on ussenate.gov. I don't know if it's there yet. I think it was literally so fast, it's not there yet. But I'm trying to get the actual vote list, because I want to know, where the hell were the rest of the budget hawks? How did Ted Cruz vote? I'm just going to Google it. Did he vote for the budget deal? Yes, he did, according to his own website, dated February 8th. Washington, D.C. U.S. Senator Ted Cruz issued the following statement. After much consideration, I will reluctantly vote for this legislation. The bill contains major victories if hurricane relief and restoring vital defense spending were the only elements of this bill. I would be supporting it energetically and enthusiastically. Unfortunately, in addition to funding these critical priorities, the bill also unnecessarily balloons the deficit. So, this is the problem with our government. It's that you can't be a fiscal hawk and say, fine, shut it down. I agree with President Trump in that respect. Fine, shut it down. No true fiscal conservative should be afraid of the phrase, shut it down. Shut it down every day. I jumped on Twitter on the 9th, when this happened, and I pitched it to the people. I pitched it to my followers on Twitter. By the way, if you want to follow along, tweet at the HollowNet. I'm there pretty much every day, tweeting things out. And I tweeted out a suggestion that I think is going to fall on completely deaf ears and nobody's going to follow through with. But I said, first and foremost, shut down the government. Shut it down. I called for a 75% reduction in the federal budget. 75%. And before you cry to me that, you can't do that, Matt, it's never been done before, bullet. Bull. That's what we say in my house instead of the excrement of a bovine. We say bullet. And the kids still haven't gotten the reference, but they're young yet. But it absolutely has been done. It was done by one of our greatest presidents, Silent Cal himself, Calvin Coolidge. Calvin Coolidge didn't just cut the size of government once, he cut it twice. He cut the government in half, and then he cut the government in half again. Do the math, kids. That's a 75% reduction in the budget. It is doable. It can be done. If you strip everything off of the table, except for what is explicitly called for in the Constitution, the most minimum government possible, you wind up with the proper conservative constitutional government. And that is what this particular millennial is going for, this millennial constitutional conservative. I tweeted out, at Rand Paul is right. I say we cut the federal budget by 75%, or $3 trillion. With a debt of $14.7 trillion plus a deficit of $666 billion, gee, lucky number there, per the CBO, we'll have it paid off in 7 years. Boom, fixed it for you. Conservatives, reach down, find your fortitude. It's time to be conservative. Because the time to have this budget fight is now. I'll say that again. The time to have this budget fight is now. We are the majority party in both houses of Congress. We have a conservative president of the United States. We have a Supreme Court, which is more likely than any in the last 2 decades to support the type of reforms that we need to put through. If you're going to make a big win for a balanced budget and to rein in federal spending, the time is now. After 2018, we might lose the House. We might lose the Senate. If both of those things happen, we may lose the presidency. Not as a party, but we would lose President Trump because, don't mince words. If the Democrats win in 2018 in the House and Senate, and they win supermajorities in each, I promise you President Trump will be impeached. I promise you. The people will demand it on the left. They're already demanding it. It's a mute demand. It's a pointless, impotent gesture. But once the DNC has those votes, they're going to try to push that through. They would love nothing more than to make President Donald Trump the first successfully impeached and convicted president in the history of the United States of America. They would love nothing more. Which is why we must act now. Now, I didn't just say, cut the budget by 75% without making any suggestions, mind you. Oh, no. I had a couple of them. A couple of budget fixes here from the conservative greatest hits catalog. Cap all government salaries, all of them, that's right, all of them, at $75,000 a year. $75,000. Now, there are things like expense accounts, enabling representatives and senators to get to and from and do what they got to do. That I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about take-home W-2 salary. Cap it, $75K, no exceptions. Up to and including the big boys. I'm talking 5-star general, who gives it? $75,000. Okay? Secretary of Defense, $75,000. Speaker of the House, $75,000. You've been a senator longer than there has been Christianity, $75,000. Don't care. The government cannot afford it. And if $75,000 is not good enough for you to serve the American people, you don't need to be there. No one should be on Capitol Hill to get rich. No one. You know what the salary for a congressman and a senator should be? Enough to keep your family afloat while you serve. Period. That's what they take into consideration in the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps, and the Coast Guard, is how much you need based on standards of living, based on cost of living. So that should be it. If $75,000 is good enough for them, it's good enough for you. Spare me these six-figure senators. These people who go into the House of Representatives with $50,000 to their name come out multimillionaires. Nancy Pelosi. Oh, God, had to get that out of my chest. It's time to put an end to it. Now, I went into a little bit more detail on my Facebook page when I called this out, because I'm passionate about it. I mean, there are things we can do. Congressional pensions, end them. Period. Gone. Congressional sweetheart healthcare package, get rid of it. Lose it. You should have to shop on the healthcare market like everybody else. And I'm not talking about the subsidized healthcare market, the Obamacare market. BS. You should be able to pull up your own Blue Cross Blue Shield agent, just like I do, get in touch with a Humana rep, hashtag not a sponsor, and get yourself a regular health plan at the regular rate for an individual family. And then see how quick we get some dang health reforms. Then see how quick they come down on the insurance companies when they actually have to really pay for it. When they have to really buy it themselves. Let's see how quick that happens. Let's see tort reform happen the first time they actually have to pay a doctor bill. Okay? You know how expensive it is to have kids in this country? I mean, if you're actually going to pay for it instead of having Uncle Sam do it for you, it costs a ton. Okay? It costs a ton. I am still paying for my beautiful twin little boys. Okay? They were born 1.5 years ago. Isn't that fun? Isn't that wonderful? The glory of life. The fact that I am in debt already, and the kids aren't even 2 years old. I made sure I put this out just so everybody understands me. I put it in a little bit greater detail on Facebook. I said, terminate all congressional pensions. Military spending should be only as explicitly requested by the Pentagon. In other words, no military spending should originate with a congressman. Or with a senator. You know why? Because instead of originating from that congressman or that senator, you know who thought of that spending bill? You know who dreamt that one up? Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon. John McCain, do I have your attention? Is this thing on, boss? Hey, Jeff Flake, you listening? Yeah, I know those guys love you. Think about it. Your congressman, what the hell does your congressman know about what the military needs for hardware? All spending bills must originate from the House. So the House calls upon the military to provide them with figures for what they need. The House then looks at those, promptly uses it for its intended purpose, which is to wipe away the fecal matter from their crevasse, deposits it in the toilet directly, and then goes to their lobbyists. The reason why we have some of the worst equipped troops in a decade going out into the field, if you listen to the Blaze radio, there was a caller called in last week, was talking to Glenn Beck and the guys, that his son has a weapon that won't fire straight, that was issued to him by the Army. And he can't even buy himself a new one. He just has to take what's issued. And they issued out the bayonets, right? And the bayonet, it's not sharp. It's got a notch in the tip. It's blunt. So rifles that don't shoot straight and blunt bayonets. Yeah, folks, we're doing solid. #1 military-industrial complex in the world, because the spending is not being driven by the Pentagon. The spending is being driven by the politicians. Make no mistake. I've got on a little bit of a rant here, and I blew right through my first designated break. That's okay. I'll catch one at the bottom of the hour. Moving on. Terminate the U.S. Department of Education and the IRS. Close them down. Do it now. The way you close down the IRS? Boom, 10% flat tax, collectible by the Department of the Treasury. 10% is good enough for God, should be good enough for the government. Abolish the Federal Reserve System and restore monetary policy control to the Congress and the Treasury. Basically, we should have the minimum possible government within the confines of the Constitution. Full stop. Okay? So this is what I put out there when I ask, does the Republican Party, does the GOP even conservative anymore? Do you even lift, bro? Do you even Constitution, bro? How can you call yourself a fiscal conservative, Ted Cruz, testing, looking for the senator from Texas, Mr. Ted Cruz, alleged fiscal conservative, when they put on, oh, well, this is the only way that we can get through the aid package to Puerto Rico and to Texas. No, you put that into its own bill. You actually do a budget, not a budget deal, not a CR, as they call it, or a continuing resolution, which kicks the can down the road. You want to actually set a budget for FEMA. You actually want to put aside aid specifically for Puerto Rico, Texas, and all the hurricane victims that there are, and the wildfire victims in California. Do that. Don't tag it in with this bill that's packed full of pork, and then guilt, force, and otherwise conservative Texas legislator into signing it. Because that's what happened here. Somebody reached out to Ted and grabbed him by the fundraisers and gave a good squeeze. Ted Cruz nor any other Texas legislature can't vote against aid for Hurricane Harvey? Are you crazy? Political suicide. It kills me. It really does kill me. When we look at the situation on its face, where for the first time in a decade, we have a GOP president, we have a GOP Senate, GOP House, and heck, we even got a right-leaning judge appointed to the Supreme Court. Woohoo! We won, guys, remember? But we're still spending out of control. We're mortgaging the futures of our children. I mean, should I apply for my Chinese Social Security card now or wait a couple of years? I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, big story going on right now. It seems that CNN, in a true break of character, is in the propaganda business. And how do we know that? Because they issued an article that's being largely derided as propaganda about the North Korean minister of propaganda. Shocker. We'll be back. You're listening to the HoloNet Podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. Stick around.
My fellow citizens, recent events have imposed upon the patriotic people of this country a responsibility and a duty greater than that of any since the Civil War.
It is the common people of the world that are interested in this business. They know when we have war, it is they that have to bear the burden. It's their sisters and mothers and daughters that have to wait, trembling, to hear the news.
We are called as a people to give testimony in the sight of the world to our faith that the future shall belong to the free. Since this century's beginning, a time of tempest has seemed to come upon the continents of the earth.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. And let me remind you also that moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue.
I want the people of America to be able to work less for the government and more for themselves. I want them to have the rewards of their own industry. This is the chief meaning of freedom. Until we can reestablish a condition under which the earnings of the people can be kept by the people, we are bound to suffer a very severe and distinct curtailment of our liberty.
You're listening to the HoloNet Podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. The new conservative resistance begins right here, right now.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
And we're back. You're listening to the HoloNet Podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network from Phoenix, Arizona. I am your rapidly psychologically deteriorating host, Matt Holloway. And man, there are some days where it just hurts to read the news. I mean, it's painful. I mean, eye bleed inducing crap. I mean, go to rollcall.com. just because I want to tie off on this budget thing now before we start actually talking about the real overall budget explanation. Rollcall.com, politics. Which House members voted against their leadership on the budget deal? Both Democrats and Republicans bucked their party's leader. Oh boy. The House's early Friday morning passage of the bill to reopen the government after a brief shutdown was not your typical budget vote deal. Unlike similar measures in Congress has passed in recent years to lift sequestration spending caps and suspend the debt ceiling, this one drew a limited amount of Republican opposition and minimal Democratic support. Typically, it's the opposite. A sizable number of House Republicans, usually a third to half of the conference, would vote against such a deal, and the vast majority of Democrats would normally support it. But only 29% of House Republicans voted against the budget deal Friday that hitched a ride on a six-week stopgap funding measure, and 62% of House Democrats voted against it. Folks, something is terribly wrong here. Now, we're going to continue to hear about, the dueling memos going in between the House Republicans, House Democrats, on the Intelligence Committee, ding, 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 ding. And that's going to go on for quite some time. The Trump dossier has been thoroughly beaten to death at this point. It's not going to hurt the president at this point. Uranium One appears to be drawing some traction. Maybe, please God, we will actually see some closure to the unmitigated corruption of the Obama administration and of then Secretary Hillary Clinton's time at the Department of State. I hope and I pray that we're actually going to see some closure and some reform at the Federal Bureau of Investigation to restore some confidence in our Department of Justice. All these things I hope for, but this is what the news media, the mainstream media, is going to be ramming down your throat and in various other orifices for the next couple of weeks. Why? Because they want to keep your eye off of the fact that the system in D.C. has effectively broken down to the point where you have Democrats voting against a budget hike and you have Republicans voting for it. Why? Because it is the Trump brand budget hike. It's the Trump brand steak or champagne or a diploma from Trump University. It, like anything else that the president touches, or that is done in his name, is carrying his branding to the point where the Democrats don't even want to touch it. They don't even want to touch it. So in order to get a budget deal through, in order to keep the government functioning, the GOP had to go individually, the whip had to go individually from rep to rep. We need you to vote for this one, because we know we don't have the Democrat support. And if there's a long-term government shutdown, we're going to get slammed for this. Folks, historically speaking, the majority party wins in a shutdown. It's the minority party that gets slammed. Why are you helping them? Because at the end of the day, all you're doing is helping the DNC. When you put up a huge inflationary budget, $300 billion in spending. Billion with a B. It's not the way. I implore Republicans, find your conservative roots. You know where they are? They're in your constituencies. They're in your town hall meetings. Listen to the people that are telling you to slash the budget, to cut out the government, to get it out of their lives. And listen. President Trump has done a lot of great conservative things since he got in office. Reduction in regulation, that's a very conservative thing. That's outstanding. His foreign policy moves, very solid from a conservative standpoint. Nikki Haley at the UN is doing an amazing job. But what in the name of God happened to Congress? Just like that Ted Cruz quote that I put in the montage at the beginning. It seems like when you get to D.C., you forget to listen to the people. You say you're gonna, but you don't. Now, moving along, this big item in the news. Definitely have to touch on it because, oh man, when even HuffPo gets to call out CNN, you know something's good. You know it's good. When even HuffPo has to point to their ideological allies and decry that something is rotten in Denmark, you know something's bad. And lo and behold, they have. HuffPo reporting on it, CNN reporting on it themselves, Fox News following up as well, that there is substantial backlash to an early article that was put out about the head of the North Korean propaganda arm, which would be the elder sister of the supreme leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un. This lady is being referred to as the Princess of North Korea. By all accounts, she probably would have been the supreme leader of North Korea. She was a lot closer to her father when he was still alive, but there seems to be some rather significant issue, culturally speaking, with a woman running the country. I don't think we're going to see that happen in North Korea for quite some time. But the point is, this is a member of the Kim family. This is a member of Kim Jong-un's inner circle. Okay? Which means that at some point or another, she has doubtlessly, without question, either ordered somebody's death, been aware of somebody's death being ordered, orchestrated it, covered it up, done something horrifically evil in order to be there. You don't get this high in a totalitarian government, in a dictatorship, without having your hands simply drenched in blood. And they're calling this woman the Ivanka Trump of North Korea. Think on that just for a beat, okay? CNN reports, listen to this lead. If diplomatic dance were an event at the Winter Olympics, Kim Jong-un's younger sister, sorry, I thought she was older, would have been favored to win gold. With a smile, a handshake, and a warm message in South Korea's presidential guestbook, Kim Yo-jong has struck a chord with the public just one day into the Pyeongchang Games. She wrote, I hope Pyongyang and Seoul get closer in our people's hearts and move forward the future of prosperous unification. Seen by some as her brother's answer to America's first daughter Ivanka Trump, Kim 30 is not only a powerful member of Kim Jong-un's kitchen cabinet, but also a foil to the perception of North Korea as antiquated and militaristic. How can you be a foil to a perception that is actually fact? North Korea is antiquated and is militaristic. These aren't just fancy notions that are pulled out of the sky. This is a fact-based analysis of the country. They're a military junta dictatorship. Their technological level is equivalent to most countries insofar as what is deployed to the actual citizens, most countries in the 60s. The internet for the people is largely non-existent, if applicable, is heavily restricted to a national intranet. They go on to say, but as North Korea's brutal dictator Kim's brother has ruled with an iron fist since coming to power, operating Nazi-style prison camps, repressing political opposition, and even executing senior officers and his own family members in an effort to consolidate power. In Pyeongchang, her presence is a major storyline for reporters and a buzz on the street, with some in South Korea curious and accepting, while others are skeptical, if downright cynical. This woman is Goebbels revisited! Don't let the charm, the swagger, and the smile fool you! This is the number 2 person in the Kim dynasty right now. I would like you to meet my number 2 person, number 2. That's who this is. That is who we're dealing with. But she's charming the world. Press conferences and warm handshakes and all that, and the world is swooning, it seems. It's absolutely insane. And this is the kind of crap that you're finding on the news. We have conservatives who have forgotten how to conservative, and a world that seems to be charmed by the the right-hand person in the North Korean regime. Now, CNN does a good job of breaking down the family ties here, but then goes into this full paragraph of North Korea's Ivanka Trump. Now, how much of a dig at President Trump is this? When you're taking the first daughter of the United States, who, granted, has a de facto sort of tie to the administration as their goodwill ambassador, so to speak, and travels the world on matters of state, you're taking Ivanka Trump and comparing her to the head propagandist of North Korea, who plays an intrinsic and institutional role in the government, has massive power, massive sway over the decisions of her brother, and is likely a lethal woman in her own right. And you're comparing her to the rich socialite daughter of the President of the United States. Let that sink in. Okay? The number 2 person in the North Korean regime, in power, in authority, in ranking, so you know that some of the people that were killed at her brother's order, that order passed through her on the way down. And this is what you're comparing the first daughter of the United States to. Cheers, CNN. Way to morally equivocate someone who is complicit in the mass imprisonment of her own people in what you, in your own story, called Nazi-style camps, who is no doubt indirectly and directly responsible for many, many deaths. And you just compared her on equal terms to the rich socialite daughter of the President of the United States. Bad day to be Ivanka Trump, man. Bad day. How the two can even be mentioned in the same sentence is staggering. Boggles the mind. I don't know a ton about Ivanka Trump, but I really doubt she's ever actually murdered anybody, or ordered their death, or put a smokescreen up over the fact that her people are starving, or tried to paint a pretty picture of those picturesque camps up in the mountains where slaves are working to death. Yeah, for the love of God. CNN just penned the most egregious propaganda piece about the lead propagandist of North Korea. What is this insane effort to legitimize the Kim dynasty? Is that's what this looks like. This looks like full tilt work by CNN to legitimize the Kim dynasty and try to normalize them. No, they're not normal. They starve their people so they can build up their military and test their third-rate nuclear weapons and make themselves feel like a much bigger global power than they really ever will be. But go ahead. Keep comparing her to the president's daughter. And take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the CD8 race here in Arizona. Trying to line up a couple of interviews with some of the prospective candidates, but I haven't been able to make that work thus far. We're going to work onto that into next week. And we'll touch on what's trending on Twitter. I know the Olympic Games are rather large right now and in charge. And we're also going to just lightly overview what we can look forward to in the next 2 weeks from a political standpoint. Coming to you from the edge of the Sonoran Desert in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, I'm your host, Matt Holloway. This is the HoloNet Podcast on the Lanterns Media Network.
I see people coming together not for divisiveness of party or for dichotomy of thought, but for unity in principle. In the principles that founded our nation, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Today, ladies and gentlemen, those principles are under the sternest attack that we have seen in many generations. It has become a crime in this nation nearly to express a difference in opinion from what is held by your party to be doctrine, from what is purported by the media to be truth. We have an opportunity to reach out to our fellow Americans regardless of their creed and regardless of their political inclinations, and unite as Americans, not as Republicans or as Democrats, as liberals or conservatives, but to unite around the principles that have guided this nation so well. I've covered a lot of stories, but the story that remains untold is the story of America in the 21st century, when we choose to turn back the tide against progressive socialism, when we choose to embrace the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights, when we remember what it is to be Americans. And that principle will not die as long as there's one man, one woman, one child who looks defiantly into the night and says, I am free.
You're listening to the HoloNet Podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. The new conservative resistance begins right here, right now.
Allied reinforcements have arrived from the west.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
That's right, you're listening to the HoloNet Podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. Coming back from that break, we're going to talk a little bit about the Congressional District 8 race. Last week when you joined us, we discussed the recent polling that came out, and ABC 15 has carried that forward from the 31st, that the poll suggested that Senators Debbie Leschko and Steve Montenegro, state senators that is, from the OH Predictive Insights poll, showed 21% support in the primary to fill the seat vacated by Trent Franks if the if the election was held on the 31st. But you know what? The election's not held on the 21st. Today is February the 11th. And since then, the HoloNet podcast has acquired insider information from a source close to the election that suggests that internal polling from one of the candidates suggests that Steve Montenegro's campaign may be foundering. We've also been informed that as it stands now on Sunday, that the senator from LD13 was absent at a critical rally in the past few days. Very notably so, after receiving concerted criticism online for his support of the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. Now, the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact was a state-to-state agreement which would have altered the way the election played out into a popular vote-driven system, as its name implies. It would have changed the state's rules because each state instructs, through their legislature, their electoral representatives how to vote, whether it is a split vote, whether it's winner take all. This would have changed the rules for the states participating in the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, causing the states to vote in line with the popular vote total for their state. Not a split, but it would have changed over the rule completely. And under these terms of the National Popular Vote, we would have had President Hillary Clinton. And that seemingly has come back to dash the campaign of Steve Montenegro at this point. So, as of this story, Leshko and Montenegro were leading the polls at that point. That's from OH Predictive Insights. But I'm going to give the prediction here that Senator Montenegro may be having some problems related to his support of the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, which was carried as part of the AZ Central debate that aired about 2 weeks ago. And this may give the pro-Trump, pro-MAGA, it would seem, candidate, Phil Lomas, the opportunity to still compete in this thing, because as of the 31st, he was hanging in at third at 12%. The race could be changing, and we could be looking at a Leshko front-running race with Phil Lomas trailing behind and Steve Montenegro behind him. So it looks like fighting for second and third. It appears right now that Debbie Leshko, as of this morning, is definitely the front-runner, but I will say, what went from a 10% difference on the 31st may be closing right now between Phil Lomas and Steve Montenegro. We're going to have to stay tuned and let you know. Now, in other news, the Democrat primary here, Hiral Tipernini, I'm probably butchering that name, is running for the Democrat primary for Congressional District 8, and she's actually running against Brianna Westbrook. And they had their AZ Central debate on January 25th. And AZ Central is actually given their endorsement to the doctor. I'm not going to... Tipernini. I think it's Tipernini. They've actually given their endorsement to Tipernini. And in a strange turn of events, AZ Central has also endorsed Debbie Leshko. So I have to vote in this election, and I find myself pegged with the question. Do I vote for someone who I don't know very well in the form of Debbie Leshko or Phil Lomas? Phil Lomas, who was a campaign official for the Trump campaign here in Arizona, or Debbie Leshko, who honestly I don't know a ton about, Steve Montenegro, who has represented my district for a long time, but who voted in favor of the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, which I can't agree with at all, and I'll provide a link to my breakdown of that from my days writing for The Blaze. But this does weigh in. Debbie Leshko has been endorsed by AZ Central and the Arizona Republic. I wouldn't put that as a win in my column. On that note, you're listening to the HoloNet Podcast on the Lanterns Media Network, and we will see you next week. Till then, good night, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.